Hello. Good afternoon, everyone. LJ here, the Go Biz Guy, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Hey, we have an amazing guest. He's what you call a junior achievement success story. We met long time ago, back in the day when I was executive director of Junior Achievement, and he was. Those of you that don't know what Junior Achievement is, it set up many companies and they have corporate sponsors. And this particular individual was the president of the bank, collecting money and everything else like that. So today, what I'd like to do is I would like to introduce to you a friend of mine, and like I said, a Junior Achievement success story, James Hightower. James, welcome aboard.
Oh, hey, good to be here, Lauren.
Yeah. Well, so let's talk a little bit about your childhood, and let's talk a little bit about where'd you grow up at?
Kind of grew up in several places. My parents were married and originally from my mother's originally from Madison, West Virginia, Boone County. My dad was from Huntington, and he was went to Marshall University. My mother went to St. Mary's Catholic College. He was a pastor. He was a chaplain of West Virginia State University back when it was West Virginia State College.
Okay.
And at that point, I was a baby in Charleston, West Virginia. But long story short, they ended up getting divorced early in my life. They separated. Actually, when my mother was pregnant with my brother, my mother decided to go back to anesthesia school. She was a nurse, but she went to anesthesia school. Actually, she was the first African American nurse anesthetist in the state in West Virginia's history.
Oh,
One
wow.
of the first in the country. She's in their Hall of Fame and everything. And once they separated, when they got divorced, she sent up my brother and I to live with our grandmother in Boone County. So we were there till we were like 7. Then she got a job with University of Virginia UVA Medical Center. Still is one of the top medical centers in the country. And that's when we moved to Charlottesville, Virginia. Grew up there until, in our teens. Then she got a job offer from CAMC. Plus, she wanted to be closer to her mother and her family here in West Virginia. So then
Okay.
my freshman year of high school, we moved back. And it was from there that, I ended up in Junior Achievement my junior year in high
Wow.
school and stuff like that. Yeah. And
What
since
high
that
school?
time,
Yeah. I'm sorry. Go ahead. What high school did you go to?
well, I went to several high schools. Went to a
In Junior
Charleston
Achievement.
Catholic, of course.
Okay.
Oh,
All
Junior
right.
Achievement, I was at, I believe I was at St. Albans Senior High. I
Okay.
transferred
Cool.
from Catholic. I want to know what it was like to be in a public school, right? Because even in Virginia, I went to a private Episcopalian school, right? So I
Okay.
know what it was like to be with the regular kids, right?
Yeah.
And yeah, so I was at St. Albans High School my last 2 years, and that's when I was at Junior Achievement. Yep.
Cool. So you moved around a lot, and your dad was a pastor. Your mother.
Right. Yep.
Okay. So did he have a local church in West Virginia, or did he have churches all over the country where
Well,
you
in
moved
his
to?
case, he was, like I said, he was a chaplain at West Virginia State College. Back in the day, most colleges, universities had like a major church where the students were, expected to go to. So he was a chaplain there, and I believe he had a church in Huntington. And now, once my parents divorced, this is way back in the '60s.
Okay. All
Back
right.
then, and as a point, when I was growing up, my brother and I are the only kids we knew of, any of our friends knew of, that actually had divorced parents, right? So once that happened, he was, of course, defrocked, okay, from
Okay.
because that denomination. So he went into business, financial services. He remarried. In fact, he married Miss Black, Washington, D.C.
Did
My
he
stepmother, he
really?
lived in Washington, D.C. Yeah, my stepmother, yeah, she was a beauty queen. She's a nice lady to this day. I mean, I have nothing against my stepmother. She's great. But yeah,
Yeah.
so he started a new family. My mother also ended up getting married, remarried, more than once.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Uh-huh.
just a typical. I think we're kind of ahead of way things are today, right? So today it's pretty normal to have parents who have parents, step parents, maybe the second or third step parents. But in the
Mm.
'70s, in particular, that was, unless you lived in Hollywood, right?
Yeah. Right.
That was a bit unusual, but
Excuse
that's
me.
kind of what
Yeah.
we dealt with, which was, it is what it is, right?
Well, thank you for that background and everything, because I don't know. Sometimes what's interesting is how entrepreneurship is kind of born out of their parents' either demise or their blessings. And it's interesting because I think what happens is that core values are established by parents. Wouldn't you agree?
I believe that's true, absolutely. Whether, and in many cases, and I think it's more prevalent today, is that, those values are developed whether or not the parents clearly communicate them and say, this is what we believe and this is what uh, we stand for. Children observe and create that based on how the parents live. They can tell what the parent stands for by what their what their behavior and what their focus is. And I think where we've had problems and where the bitterness has come and dysfunctions when parents articulate that they believe one thing, but their lifestyles and what they invest in is another, right? You know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
All right.
And that's what we're seeing a lot. If you say, uh, I believe in marriage and all this other stuff, and yet, you're having an affair, you have side girlfriends or side boyfriends, then that does communicate something to the child that stays with them. And I've seen that with friends and how they've reacted to it. And also, it's part of my past. At one point, my wife and I did marriage counseling to other couples and, dealt with a lot of interesting, or I should say interesting, in many cases, sad situations. So, but I will say in my own case, one of the things that, especially when we were living in Virginia, because my mother was trying to establish her. And we lived in West Virginia. We were taken care of by our grandmother pretty exclusively, and
Okay. All right.
my mother basically told my grandmother was at work, and she said, I'll double your salary if you just watch your own grandkids, right? And I'll also refurbish your house and the whole bit. You don't have to work anymore. So that's what she did, and that was and she actually came to Virginia with us. My mother said, you just move, just come stay with us in Virginia and watch over the kids.
Wow.
And I'm very grateful for that because my grandfather was also a pastor, right? So it's
Okay.
multi-generational. We have pastors that my great great grandfather was a pastor and he was born in like 1832, that type of thing.
Dang.
But I'm so grateful because my mother was very much career oriented. Of course, our father had a new family and, really didn't have much to do with us.
Wow.
So our
Hmm.
grandmother being there, and she was very clear about articulating core values, very, you know, made sure we went to church, made sure that we knew that, Jesus Christ is Lord. And
Wow.
also because
Awesome.
right. And because my grandmother had been a principal, in fact, she was um, back during the time of segregation, in most southern towns, if you were lucky, you'd have a black school. So they are usually very, very dilapidated and subpar. But my grandfather, it's a big story. I've had people tell me I'd make a movie about it, how that the black students had a shack where they all had, most of them couldn't even go to it because it wasn't worth it, hardly any education. But my grandfather, who's the pastor, the black pastor of the community, got things together, gathered money, and they built a brand new, um, for the time, state of the art school.
Wow.
And it was for grades 1 through 12 for the black students in this case in all of Boone County.
Wow.
And my grandmother, who, she went to a private Presbyterian school in Florida, stuff like that, So education, she was the principal of that school in charge of educating all of the black students of the county. And, so education, I didn't learn most of this stuff until after I was an adult. It's like,
Really?
to me,
Okay.
to me, she was just grandma, but, she made sure that we can, we started our ABCs and math and everything, I could read by the time I was 3 years old, okay, because my grandmother started tutoring us, like,
Wow.
my entire memory, I think math, I think I didn't start, algebra till like second grade, but she did this on her own over and above the education that we were getting in school. So that really helped out to keep us above. But it wasn't until years later that, I was just, my grandmother, was already been dead. I was talking to different people. Didn't you know that your grandfather built that school? And, didn't you know that your grandmother was a principal and all this other stuff? And, and so that was something that, and I think you and I talked about how I found that after she was, they told me that my grandfather was a buyer of fish. And
Yeah.
he
Right.
would
Yeah.
import, export fish. And of course, that's been my career for 30 years. And I've been very good at it. It was something that I gravitated to. And to find out that is what my grandfather did, decades before I was born. And that was amazing. And of course, we also talked about how, that whole generation, they were so understated.
Well,
They would do great. Yeah, go ahead.
let me ask you a question then. So do you think they
Yeah.
were underestimated because they were black?
No, I said not
Oh,
underestimated,
I'm
understated.
okay. I'm sorry. Okay.
Oh, but but yeah, absolutely. I believe
Okay.
that's part of it. Absolutely. But,
Uh-huh.
I think being from West Virginia, all right. Um, I mean, yeah, and living living in different parts of the country. I think being from West Virginia are understated because if you're from
Right.
West Virginia, they treat you, I've seen my white friends being treated, in fact, I've been treated better because they assume because I'm black, I'm not from West Virginia, better than my white friends who clearly articulated that's where they're from. Oh, you're a hillbilly. Oh, you're a backwoods, this, that, and the other. And, I would point out, I said, oh, you do realize that Chuck Yeager was also
Yeah.
a backwoods hillbilly from West Virginia. And you do realize Peter Marshall is also a backwoods hillbilly from West Virginia. And it's kind of hilarious that way. And what was it? I think, I heard one guy say, you're a West Virginia hillbilly. There are no black West Virginia hillbillies. And then I corrected him. Yeah. Uh,
Oh my
so then I had to
gosh.
correct. Yeah. Oh yeah. Just like sure. There are no black hillbillies. What do you mean? You're West Virginia. I was like,
Ah,
so
oh
I had
my
to correct him.
gosh.
First I had to keep from punching him out because that's the one that any good hillbilly will do, right? No,
Yeah. Right.
but
Right. Yeah.
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 But then
Yeah.
I calmly explained to him the history of how that the western counties of Virginia were always free. Okay, so even during the time of slavery, blacks who could escape and get to the western counties or just go straight to the western counties of Virginia could live a regular life and that they were accepted, by the whites and by the hillbillies. They
Right.
weren't, the hillbillies didn't try and grab them, send them back.
Mhm.
And, blacks have been living free in West Virginia for 300 years, 100 years even before the Civil War. And, my family ended up in West Virginia because my great great grandfather, who was a slave on the Fuller plantation in Georgia, he managed to escape and he went, and he made it to the western counties of Virginia. And of course, the western counties of Virginia, when it came time for the Civil War, declared that they were against slavery and that they were going to stand with the Union, whereas the eastern counties declared they were going to stand with the Confederacy. And that is why Abraham Lincoln signed into law the
Right.
state of West Virginia.
Right.
That's how West Virginia was created. Despite the fact you have a lot of people, well, I'm for the Confederacy, all this
No.
other stuff. And
Yeah.
you
Right.
got a
You're
statue
stupid.
of
Yeah.
the,
Right. Right. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right, that whole
Uh,
bit. But that's how the state was created. Anyway.
yeah. And I just, and so fast forwarding, to today, do you, I don't know. I've never talked about this in my podcast, but do you think that being black, prohibits, um, entrepreneurship, or does it accelerate it because of, the race?
Well, I think, that's a very complicated question.
I
Okay.
know it is. I know it
Because,
is. Yeah.
because now we're getting into, I think you could directly, okay, the black community has always had entrepreneurship.
Yeah,
And it's
yeah,
been an
they have.
entrepreneur,
Yeah.
and it's been an entrepreneurship that has been successful and that has flourished despite the fact of the racism and that can be perceived. What I tell people too is that you have to look at it from a broader term. Like every now and then I get into and I say that, like, for instance, you've heard of Sears, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
You heard of Sears Roebuck,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
That's
Right,
what it
right.
used to be called. Well, most people don't know that Roebuck was black.
I didn't know
Okay.
that. Right. I didn't know
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Roebuck was the one who actually founded Sears Roebuck. So, but here's what happened. Okay. So Roebuck, he had the ideas on how to buy and all these products and stuff like that. But then when he would go, to deal with businesses, the whole nine yards, they would see that he was black and they wouldn't deal with him. Okay. But his buddy, even back then, you had black and white and what have you,
Yeah.
Hispanic,
Uh-huh.
whatever, Native
Uh-huh.
American, had friends. His buddy, by the name of Mr. Sears, he said, "Hey, you know what? I need you to be the face, my face. So I'm going to set this up, but I need you to go in there and sign the deal, okay? Because they'll
Wow.
deal with you because you're white, but they
Okay.
won't deal with me because I'm black."
Okay.
And
Wow.
so
Wow.
that is how it got. That's so so basically it's like when you hear Sears Roebuck, and when they would draw him, it was a situation where I think he was biracial, like, but how it
That's
was
fine.
back then,
Yeah. Yeah.
132nd, yeah. But as far as they're concerned, you're still too black, right?
Yeah.
So when
Right.
they would
Yeah.
take pictures of him from that time, they would show them together, but they just wouldn't color him in. That's kind of how
I
that
love it.
worked.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but
Yeah.
that's how Sears Roebuck, got started, and he was kind of, and that major corporation, but it was a black man's entrepreneurship to even conceive of this huge corporation.
I
As
love
his
it.
partnership with his buddy, who was also, Sears was no slouch. Okay, but very,
Right.
very intelligent. And the reason why that's so poignant for me is that, for instance, one of the things that people think is that they had separate but equal. They had white schools and black schools, right? Okay,
Right.
back, the times of segregation. But what's not generally known is that in the deep South, Georgia, Mississippi, the whole bit, there was no black schools and white schools. There's only white schools.
Right.
Those states said we will not provide any funding to educate black people, right? So what you had throughout the South, and I was talking to a friend, he'd heard it too. They have what they call Roebuck schools.
Really?
That's right. My grandmother went to Roebuck School until she got until eighth grade, and then her parents sent her way to a private school, a private Presbyterian school down in Florida. But Roebuck, of Sears Roebuck, since being a black millionaire, he personally paid for black schools throughout the South.
Dang. Wow.
He set them up and he paid for them, or he supported them. That's one of the things that he did to provide, because Georgia wasn't going to do it, the state of Georgia. So he paid for it.
Wow.
What else? And then, of course, Sears. when it got kind of some squirrely in the 30s and 40s, it went from Sears and Roebuck just to Sears.
Right.
But when the words start, and really they say when words started to get out that, hey, wait a minute, Roebuck was black. So, by that time, the corporate people of that time, the Mad Men guys got rid of that. But yeah, so and there's other great instances. Now, I say all this to say is that I think entrepreneurship in any community is based upon just a good family structure. Mothers, fathers, mothers, stability, and children being raised by both fathers and mothers doing good, honest, hard work, encouraging their kids to find their dreams, and of course, stable and commensurate education. All right, because you saw a lot of this in the black community. All the way up until the 1950s, when the United States government, and seeing in, I'll say, elements of the United States government. I heard a European guy. I listened to a podcast from a thing called the Duran,
Okay.
and it's a guy out of Greece, a guy out of London, but they really they call stuff, right.
Mm-hmm.
They will say, okay, this is what's really going on, and this is what's going to happen, and they're like 99% right. But one of the things that came up when they were talking about that, when they were trying to say that the Americans are doing this, that, yeah, and he said, wait a minute. The guy said, look, it's not the Americans that do that. Number one, he said, the American people, or the most part, are not for just opening up their borders, and they're not for doing all of these interesting and controversial coups against and Maidan coups, and overthrowing other governments, and
Right.
assassination. So the American people, he said, he's British, and he said, I know American people. That's not what they're for. He said, it's their government that's doing this. And he says, it's not even there. He said, when you say American government, you really have to look at it that there are multiple governments within the American government.
There are.
And some
True that.
yeah. And he said, yeah, some facets of it, like you talked about the neocons, the libcons, and he said different factions get away with and do certain things. Like the neocons are the ones that are fighting for the Ukrainian war right now, because every
Right.
time, the longer the Ukrainians fight the Russians, attack the Russians, the more money gets sent over there, the more money that they make, and the more money gets siphoned off. You may not agree with all of this,
Yeah.
but that's what he's saying. And I think that sections of our government who were very much dedicated to the eradication of the black population, okay, literally. Margaret Sanger, Adolf Hitler said that his inspiration of the final solution to kill the Jews was on the writings of Margaret Sanger, her inspiration in trying to kill all the blacks, which was, genocide through peaceful means.
Yeah, right.
By doing that, she set up Planned Parenthood, which is why just recently, when it all came out, that Margaret Sanger created Planned Parenthood not to help and empower women, but to sterilize and to abort as many black babies, and what she used to call the mud races.
Oh my
which
gosh.
is
Wow.
which is now when you say mud races, 2/3 of the mud races are now considered white. Okay, Irish, Italians, Hispanics. Okay, that's and that's what she considered. All right, but the methodology that she set up, and her whole thing was, whatever you do it, you know, basically in the light of day in some ways, but hidden in other ways.
Right.
That is what certain elements of our government did when they came up with, okay, the interstate system in our country. Okay. So these elements, when they saw World War II, what they found out was that the Jews were the richest, most affluent, most powerful ethnic group in all of Europe. They became savages. They turned them into savages and animals a little bit by putting them in these ghettos. They forced them out of their homes. They put them in a restricted area. They gave them no jobs. They said, don't worry, we're going to give you free food and free dwelling. You just have to stay in this area and you can't get out. Okay, and what they found was, and they did this based on experiments that they did on mice.
Wow.
Okay. They found
Wow.
if you took mice and overcrowded them into a small space, that the mice would start to develop deviant behaviors. Okay, they become more violent, they become more
Right.
stealing, all this
Okay.
stuff. So they did the same thing to these Jews, and most psychologists say, well, they're so intelligent, so well educated, so erudite. There's nothing. Surely that won't happen. Well, they did it to the same thing. The Jews overcrowded them, gave them no jobs, whole bit, and guess what they found? All these deviant behaviors, violence, black markets, homosexuality exploded that didn't exist before. Births, right? So after the war, after the war, they decided, hey, why don't we do the same thing to the black community? So, and we'll do it creating the interstate system that we saw in Germany, the Autobahn, where we create the Autobahn in the United States, called the interstate system. We'll use it, the eminent domain, to force the blacks out of their businesses and out of their families. And see, here's the way it normally works. If eminent domain comes to your house, what's supposed to happen is, if you were white, of course now they do it to everybody, but back then if you're white, they give you a check for $100,000 because we're
Right.
taking your property before you move out. Now, when it came time for the blacks eminent domain, they said, hey, we're not going to give you any money for your house and for your business, but what we'll do is we've created these nice free apartments, free housing. We call them the projects. Of
Oh
course,
my
later they
word.
were called
Wow.
later they called them the ghettos, right?
Wow.
And so so then they put all these black families who before had banks, it had cleaners, it had restaurants, it had all this stuff. Because people don't realize that just like you have a Chinatown, just like you have an Italian town, almost every major city has a black town. I'll give you a case in point. You know, Charleston, now how the interstate goes, right, along the outside of you're coming up from, let's say, Barmet. Then all of a sudden it takes a hard kind of left through the city.
Mm-hmm.
It goes across the Canal River, then it goes on the other side when it passes gets to South Charleston. Then it goes back across the Canal River and then back along the same side. That area where it turns, that was black. That was the black side of Charleston. Just as you would get past the Civic Center, that's you see the interstate.
Right.
That was the original black neighborhood.
Wow.
So, and then they built the projects out there just south of South Hills. Well, so you had black banks, black businesses, black, everything. Okay. In fact, in the 1950s, like today, the most affluent minorities, most professional, the whole bit, are Asians. Okay. I mean, the group of, now, if you're going to break it down by ethnicity, which this is hilarious. Okay. You know what the number one ethnic group in terms of money is in this country?
Latinos.
Nope. Not even close.
I
Not even
figured
close.
as much. Yeah. So
Number one group in this country are homosexuals, gay men. Number two is gay women. Number three is Asian families, black, male and female. Number three is, number four are East Asian Indians. Number five are whites, traditional white families.
Wow.
The number four is Latinos, and then finally number five are African Americans in aggregate. But in the 1950s, it was number one in terms of aggregate. Well, whites, but number two, close second, was blacks. Okay, and you know what? We might do a podcast on just how that they've destroyed. My thing is this: whites are the canary, but in social ways, blacks are the canary in the coal mine. Okay.
No, right.
Whatever they do to blacks, they're going to get around to doing everybody else when it comes to social and cultural ways. Economically, whites are the canary in the coal mine. Okay. What they do to the white male, and white males in particular, what they do to white males, they're going to get around and do it to everybody, well, at least all the other males, but then eventually everybody else, which is why I don't like to hear all this. When they talk about how they hate white males, so this is no good. You know what? They want to do the same thing to the black males, to the Hispanic males, to the Asian. They want to do the same thing to men, period. But they can just use racism as a cover when they get very specific as to you know, the race. But anyway, getting back to what I was saying, so what they did was they recreated the ghetto system that Adolf Hitler used in Europe for the African American community here in the United States.
Wow.
And it's not just Charleston. If you know, I think
Sure.
if you go to Nashville, I used to live in Memphis, right? So I'd go to Nashville and visit friends. It's the same, you know, the interstate's on one side of the county. Then all of a sudden it makes this heavy, sharp turn right through downtown. You see, you know, through like 4 or 5 miles of downtown where it used to be the black neighborhood. Then it takes a hard right back outside the city, so it avoids the white suburbs. Yeah, it's like it's interesting. So
So,
that is
yeah.
what has I think. But just as you've had that section of people who came up with that, which is evil, you had another section of people, white and black, who were fighting against that and trying to recreate and sustain the black community. And within all of that, you've always had black family. You know, it's like you always find a way. Any group that's subjected to oppression and just attack, there's always those. By the grace of God, always finds a way. That's why I like the movie Braveheart with Mel Gibson. Okay, because
Yeah.
that
Right.
is, you know,
Yeah.
I love history because you
Yeah.
know I always find that societies always have to find a group of people that they do want to oppress if they don't have a lot of the gospel, right? So if you don't have any black people to go after, if you don't have any, you know, Asian, if you can't find anybody to go after because of the color of their skin, you'll find something. So in Great Britain, it was if you were Scottish.
Right.
So like you're a Scot, and they treated them. I mean, at least you know my ancestors in the South. People forget that blacks were free in the North. All right, I have ancestors who were free in the North.
Yep.
White people weren't all racist even back then, but uh, at least you know the ancestors who were enslaved were allowed to be slaves in the South. In England, if you were Scottish, they just wanted to kill you.
Wow.
Or they just wanted to make your life worse than death. I mean, one of the things the British used to do to the Scots is if you were engaged to get married, okay, on your wedding day, when your virgin bride would come, you would have to give her to the local group of soldiers, British soldiers, so she could be gang raped.
Wow.
He would be
Wow.
gang raped and
Wow.
the whole bit, and then they would you know give her to you so that you would finish the wedding. And of course, if you watch the movie Braveheart, that's what began the whole rebellion. He
Right.
was engaged to be married. He was going to get married, but then he refused to give his bride to be raped, and then they murdered her. Right. And the
Yeah.
reason why they did that was it's called a form of ethnic cleansing that they, you know, unfortunately the Muslims still do today. That if they can
Sure. Yeah.
rape your wife and you have this child, then that child is half whatever is never accepted. But you see, every group has gone through. Every group has been enslaved by somebody. Every group has been oppressed and hurt by somebody. We have to get past it. We have to forgive. But then we do when we do see it. That's why we have to make sure that it is completely and totally snuffed out, stopped. It's evil. And you know, I see a lot of people with racist against against white people. I think black people are the reverse. It's
Well,
just as evil, and it has to be stopped. So anyway,
well, I think then with this conversation, we almost move into politics. Okay. Because, and you know, and I don't know how to go here, but I think, left or right or wrong, I think when Obama was elected, okay, I think that the country became very divisive in terms of ethnic groups. I don't think that, um, I just wish that it was more of a conversation that we had with everybody. But I think when you take a look at the current politics and you look at Kamala and you look at Trump and everything else like that, you know, I'm not a Trump fan. I mean, I think he ran the country pretty well. And I've really not talked too much about politics on my podcast, but I think when you're talking about the ethnic groups around this country, I think politics really comes into play. It's kind of like, okay, we've opened up the borders and now we've got all these, you know, people from all over the world. And now there's corruption in the cities. There's this, that, and everything. So how do you calm all this unrest, and how does it really have an effect on businesses, like if you see in Chicago, there's only certain parts of Chicago you'll go to. All right. You don't want to go to certain parts of Washington, D.C. because of the Jamaican warlords or whatever. So how do businesses navigate through all of this uh, stuff about ethnic groups? And do you think that they're still being cleansed, if you will, in a certain different way than you just described?
Well, I was given a historical standpoint
I know
thing.
you were.
I don't think
Yeah.
that applies, but I will say, look, if and to me and many other people I've talked to, black, white, whatever, you know, you mentioned Barack Obama, okay, and I think, and I've always believed this, but now I'm having more friends, particularly black friends, come to my way of thinking. When I first said this, I was like, you're a traitor, all this other stuff, but I believe that Barack Obama was, in essence, the ultimate Trojan horse. Because let's face it, more white people voted for Barack Obama than black people. And I believe most of white people, definitely the white people I knew, the reason why they voted for Barack Obama was to prove once and for all that racism was dead in America. This is America. We've had all this racism in the past. But we have gotten past it. And to prove it, here's a guy. We're voting for him because he's a good guy. He's well spoken. He seems articulate. Seems to have a good handle on things. And the fact that he's black, yeah, fine. Let's vote for him. We're going to show that we are not racist at all. And I think that was proven to everybody except for one person, Barack Obama. Because once he got in, to your point, he was the one who created definitive sectarianism here in America. We've got
Right.
to the part where it was like, I'm an American first,
Mm-hmm.
who happens to be black or happens to be white or Irish or whatever, who
Right.
happens to be Native American. Okay. Two, no, that's the only thing that matters. What is your race? What is your gender? And then he added an
I know, right?
entirely new, right. And then he added an entirely new dimension that nobody saw coming. And that is, and if you look at his policies and if you look at who he really pushed, the only two groups that Barack Obama got really in my opinion, really galvanized and up and really just energized for was extremist gays
Mm-hmm. Right.
and extremist Muslims.
Right. Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things he did that people didn't realize is that he actually opened up an office to the Muslim Brotherhood.
Wow.
Okay. And the Muslim Brotherhood is, it's like David Duke to the Ku Klux Klan. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Right.
It's like David
Uh-huh.
Duke had the Stormfront on this magazine. Yeah, I'm not a member of the Ku Klux Klan, but he was the face, the politically correct face of the Ku Klux Klan. That's
Mm-hmm.
what the Muslim Brotherhood is because they're the what do you call it? The original or core organization to Hamas,
Yeah,
to
they are.
basically all your major terrorist organizations
Uh-huh.
that uh they had an office in the White House. Of
Wow.
course, the other thing he did was now, and this is something that no one deals with. He summarily just made an edict at the beginning of his second term that same-sex marriage is the same. Okay, of course, then later it did go to the Supreme Court, and then they
Yeah.
said, but he was the one who also brought in the same-sex marriage, and then of course.
Right.
And then finally, the whole trans thing. No one even knew. I'd say the majority of Americans had never even heard the phrase trans before Barack Obama. Transvestite, that
Right.
had been heard before,
Uh-huh.
but not trans. And of course, today, I'm sure maybe the term Big Mike.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Right.
I'll just leave it at that. Okay.
Ah.
Different videos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
now,
Right.
so now that yeah, right. And then you had the Trump administration coming. You have a lot of black people now and white. Everybody's saying that Donald Trump did more for everybody, but he definitely did more for black people than, Barack Obama. Okay.
Yes.
Case in point.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's a case in point that is inarguable. Okay. For the past 100 years, every president of the United States has given some money to HBCUs, historically black college and universities.
Right.
Okay. Like a few million, at least 10, 20 million. Okay. To be spread out among the HBCUs. Okay. All right. Guess who was the first president to not give one red dime? And interesting enough, the HBCUs did a special concert at the White House. They were invited and they came and they did like this glorious, wonderful concert singing, the classic black spirituals and the whole bit and the whole bit. Right. And the president loved it. He just thought it just moved him greatly. But guess who was that president who was also the first president to not give anything?
Barack Obama.
Barack Hussein Obama. Bush gave money to HBCUs, the Republican. Clinton gave money. Reagan gave money.
I know he did.
Okay.
Yeah.
But he didn't give one red dime. Guess who was the first president to give them billions of dollars, and also to put forth that they would get that money over the course of 10 years. So they would be funded for the next decade. Guess who's the first president to do that?
Trump.
Donald John Trump. So that's why, it's, let me say this. A lot of people don't like Donald Trump, but I lived in Boston for 2 years, and I have family in New York, so I've been going to New York since I was literally a toddler, okay? Okay, they're all like that.
Hey, listen, it's a sidebar. I've got friends. I got friends that are from New York, and they have an attitude. And if you don't understand their attitude, then you don't know. You don't understand them.
Right, exactly. I mean, and they, it's you almost have to steel yourself and realize, okay, some of them are still good people. And they are. There are a lot of great people there. Yeah. But I'll give you a point. I'll give you an example. I worked for a very large all-American corporation, okay? One of the largest companies in the world, okay? Very middle America, very just heart of America, okay? And their whole thing is that you treat everybody with dignity and respect, all right? Mm-hmm. You got to be a Boy Scout, all right? So then I go to work for this company in Boston, okay? And it's an international company. And I'm in my first corporate executive meeting, and the president comes out and says, "Okay, you effers, blah 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 blah." I mean, and my vice president's like, "What the f are you looking at, Hightower?" I mean, it was like that first meeting.
Yeah.
If I was at that other company, they would have all been fired. They would have been gone out so fast. My secretary would come in, cigarette hanging out of her mouth, throw this thing on me and well, you gotta do this right, sir, sir, because the FBI is going. It was a big story. So the fact that Trump doesn't drink. Oh, that was the other thing. Every company has their own bar. Yes. Like in Boston, there's a bar and a Dunkin' Donuts in every corner.
I love Boston, by the way. I've been there several times. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I loved it too, but and it's just a thing. After, like Cheers, that TV show.
Yeah.
Okay, that is the way it actually is. When you get off work, everybody goes to their bar. You go to your bar, and you have I'm a Christian. Yeah. So I'm a Christian, and I go in there, and I'll never forget. I ordered. Everybody's getting the scotch on the rocks, a bourbon, the whole bit. And I said, "What are you getting, Hightower?" I said, "Well, I'll have a Sprite and cranberry." Whole room gets silent. He goes, What did you say? I want a Sprite and a cranberry. And, they're like, and the bartender goes, it is like I insulted him. So he goes, I get you. So he goes back, he goes underneath the bar, and he comes up and he puts the biggest kitty glass I've ever seen. Had little toys sticking out of it. Here, kid. Here you go. Here you go. Hey, I got a Hightower. Yeah. I was like, wow. Yeah, exactly. They all started laughing too.
Yeah.
They're like, is that what you're gonna? That's like, if that's what you're gonna drink in my bar, that's what you're gonna have.
That's
yeah. So the fact that I say this so that people know that even though he seems abrasive, even though he seems kind of, not their cup of tea by those standards, that guy, he doesn't cuss much.
No.
Okay. I've never heard him use the F word. Okay.
Nope.
Which means he doesn't cuss. Okay.
Right.
I used to go to Toys R Us to get stuff for my kids, and these other kids are using the F word. I mean, little 4-year-olds using the F word to their parents. Okay.
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And the fact he doesn't drink.
Right.
Well, they gave me a kiddie drink. The fact that he's a saint by their standards. I just want to throw that out there.
Yeah.
But anyway, in terms of, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, there's certain elements of everybody that, it's like, I'm a Southern Baptist dude, and, I have a glass of wine with spaghetti and stuff like that. But I think that Trump, you can bounce politics all day, but I think because of his, he inherited his dad's business or his empire.
Yeah, well, I agree. Yeah, he did.
Yeah. And so, but he's built upon it. But he's got some good business sense about him and everything. And I like, I like abusive people that say what they want and do what they want and everything, because he's got numbers to back up everything. Look, I have gone through nearly 2 bankruptcies. I mean, I've had successes, I've had failures, just like you have. And I think when you talk about it from a business perspective, when we talk about small business owners, I think that we really need, economically and a lot of other things, we need to start helping these people move the barometer, regardless of what race they are. I don't care whether it's a nail salon. I don't care. And they have to be open in order to get ideas from people like you and I to say, here's where you need to probably improve yourself, and you need to walk down this path.
Let me tell you a story. Yeah, because, and getting back to that thing, I think what is that, let me tell you this story about a business person. He's passed away now, but he was based out of Chicago, and he was in the mortuary business. Okay.
Yeah.
Started out, back when, things were segregated, that only, black people helped black people and white people helped white, that whole thing. Yeah. But anyway, as the 60s came, and things started to open up, he got so good and so popular, he wanted to expand, grow more stuff. And like, if you walk into his typical store, his mortuary store, right? Where people, I call it a store,
yeah, I know what you mean.
Okay, right. Where people died a whole bit. You walk in, and he said he always had a picture of Mom on one side, his African American mother, and Martin Luther King on the other side, right?
Right.
And he had, black attendants. Well, he started going to the suburbs, right? And predominantly white areas. And, he couldn't get hardly any business. It's like the white people there wouldn't go to his shop. Well, then he thought about it. He said, wait a minute, how would I feel? I mean, maybe I need to broaden to be more universal to people. So he went in, he said it hurt him, but he took down a picture of Mama. He took down a picture of Martin Luther King. He put up the picture, and he put the picture of Kennedy and of, I don't know, Queen Victoria, something like that. Okay. And then he said, I hired a couple of white boys. Hired me a blonde. Hired me a Kent. I put them in the front there.
Oh my gosh. That's too freaking funny. Yeah.
And he said, my sales went through the roof. He said, I started opening those things up, place after place after place after place. And,
wow.
Because they were, I think he was talking about, he has like a multi-million-dollar business. He's like, at the point, I think at the time, he ended up being one of the biggest mortuary, corporations in the country. And, of course, when he came up, and he was black, and they're like, wow, what's the secret? Well, and that is the secret, is that you want to, if you're black, it's just amazing to me how and I think this is one of the things that Obama did to really hurt the black community. In fact, like I said, I believe that Obama didn't help the black community. He may have helped them to, okay, on an emotional level, you seem to make many African Americans feel good. All
Yeah.
right.
Right.
But I think that if you looked closer, you would be very disturbed. Number one, how can you call yourself for the black community and support Planned Parenthood
Yeah. Right. Exactly.
when Planned Parenthood? Okay, I'll give you a case in point. The largest Planned Parenthood abortion center is in Dallas, Texas, and it's located in the heart of the black community.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
And the high school my daughter went to, they put and the high school, even though it has blacks and whites, the high school itself is kind of in the more of the black section of town, and I have my daughter at a private Christian school, but then I
Uh-huh.
thought, she needs to know it, which is 90% white, which I don't care. I mean,
Right.
people
Right.
are people.
Yeah,
But
they are.
but then I thought, she's never really been around just a diverse thing of kids. So I sent her to this high school, and I actually regret it. I wish I hadn't sent her. But anyway, that's a other story. But right across the street from the high school is what? Planned Parenthood abortion clinic. And
Oh,
then we
wow.
find out, at least here in
Wow.
Michigan, that, okay, and this is this is something my wife went through. My wife gets a phone call from a friend. Says, I need you to come down here. Come down here. I said, what? Long story short, her friend's at work. She gets a frantic call from the high school. And she's like, what's going on? He says, we need you to get to the hospital as soon as possible. Why is that? Well, your daughter is in ICU. She might not make it. Well, what happened?
Wow.
Well, we can't tell you. We can't tell you. We just need to get her. So she gets her. Long story short, they find out that at a school where if you get caught with aspirin, you would definitely be not expelled, but kicked out of school for 2 or 3 days if you're
Wow.
caught with aspirin or anything like that. They sent her daughter to get an abortion without her parents' knowledge. And during
What?
the case, that's right. And that's how we found out they had an abortion clinic just across the street from the high school. And in this case, the abortion went wrong, messed up the girl. And so they had to send her to the hospital where she almost died. And then so and so the mother's like, why would you not let me know? And she said, if I give my daughter can't take an aspirin without my written slip saying that she has my permission, but you can have her to get an abortion. And
Right.
there's a law that says we don't have to tell you if your daughter is getting an abortion. And now, of course, this is 15 years ago. Now, of course, they don't have to tell you in many states if your child wants to transition as a
Right.
boy or a girl.
Yeah.
You get to school, they change their clothes, that whole bit. But anyway, that's just something that I believe that Obama started. Okay, that's the type of thing that he brought in terms of his part of his progress to support the LGBTQ. Of course, no one can forget when he put the rainbow lights in the White House. I mean,
I
that's so
know.
political. You're
Right.
supposed to represent the entire country. And I didn't necessarily want. I know we mean to talk about business and black business and entrepreneurship, but my thing is, I talk about the point I'm trying to make is that one of the things that I've seen, and I told you a story about the mortuary guy, is that
Yeah.
he's the one who put in the whole generation's mind, black people in particular, that they have to look like you. It has to be just about you. He kind of turned the African American culture into one of just complete and total racist narcissism.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Which is what we blamed white people for.
Yep.
In the 50s and 60s and 70s, a form of racist narcissism. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be honest. I mean, when I've gotten to really, I think I told you I've hung out with Warren Buffett and different, great guy, but I've also hung out with, okay, I'm with this, multimillionaire. He wasn't quite a billionaire, but, and we're at this dinner at this very posh place. And he says to me, he just said some just very interesting racist stuff. But he's like, why is it that, he said, my parents came here, got off the boat in Ellis Island with nothing. They just went up on by their bootstraps, and look at where I am now. What's the deal with, you black people? Why can't you do anything? And I said to him, You know, after my grandfather escaped, my great great grandfather escaped slavery, he did, and he to the western counties of Virginia, which is how my family ended up in West Virginia. He did go back and join up with Sherman, General Sherman,
Yeah.
and marched down, and he burned Atlanta to the ground. And my grandmother used to tell me how that uh, the joy and the pride he felt in being able to march with Sherman and the Union Army, to be able to burn Atlanta to the ground and to liberate the very plantation where he had been a slave. But he did that. But he still
Yeah.
then after that came back to West Virginia. And I said, you know, that may have kind of put a crimp in his ability to just start a business and get things going, the whole slavery thing. And then
Yeah.
I said, and then I said, you have to understand though, affirmative action has been around for 400 years. He said, what
Mm-hmm.
are you talking about? And I said, yeah. I said, the original affirmative action program was if you were white, male, Church of England, okay, then you got the job. If you weren't those things, you were on a second tier. That is, if you were Presbyterian, if you were uh, Lutheran, okay, if you're German, you're Lutheran, you're at the top of the pole. But in England, you had to be Church of England.
Mm-hmm.
Methodists were looked down upon. That's,
Right. Yep.
even John, what's the guy who started the Methodist denomination? Uh, oh, anyway, you know what I'm talking about. All right. I said, Baptists? He said, even Baptists were considered scum. It was the Baptists who fled England and founded the country.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
actually, they
Yeah.
called themselves a different, they call themselves something else, but that's how bad it was.
It was
I
the
said, if you were,
Maccabees. Yeah.
yeah, I said, you know what? I said, I was reading, and this is true, I was reading sermons from the 1840s. Okay, you can view this because back in the day, the first 150 years of our country's history, the pastor of this town, those sermons would be published in the newspaper. And I was reading I used to like to, I used to be big in history. So I'm reading these sermons and they were talking about the evils of interracial marriage. And this was going into the 1860s even, that
Mm-hmm.
you had that we have to protect these white girls from intermarrying with these savages. Okay. These animals. You know
Right.
who they were talking about? The Irish, the
Okay.
Irish
All right.
and Catholics. You know,
Okay.
if it's there here downtown. There is an authentic Irish pub that
Sure. Uh-huh.
they brought all the way over from Ireland, right? And when you walk into that pub, they have a sign the guy put up there that's from the 1870s or 60s, and it says, "No dogs, no something, no, and no Irish." because because the point and the point he was trying to make is anti-racism. That racism is always subjective. That any time like my mother used to hate Polish jokes. Like I was a real popular kid, Polacks this, Polacks that,
Right.
and I remember I told a Polish joke, and she said, "Don't you ever talk about the Polish people like that. You shouldn't talk about anybody like that." Oh, and she said, "By the way, most of those jokes that are quote I don't want to say the word, the slang word for Polish people. I am going to say that. Okay. But most of those jokes were in-word jokes in the
Yeah.
1950s. They
Right.
just switched it. And then, of course, she didn't like the blonde jokes because once it got, uncool to do the, you know, Polish jokes, they made them blonde jokes. And I just don't think you should belittle anybody based on an immutable characteristic. But anyway,
And
but
I yeah and I really appreciate this conversation, and we're up to an hour already on this, and
yeah, okay, yeah, I know. We've gone out a
so
few places, yeah.
we didn't even get to, and we have close to 300 and some odd people uh in listening already live, and so it's been a great conversation. A lot of people love this conversation, and we didn't even tap into your background and being a buyer and that type of thing. So you're going to have to be another guest another time on my podcast so we can go a little bit further about you and the success that you've had, stemming from really junior achievement into your current lifestyle. And you have so many
Absolutely.
accolades that it's awesome. And so I really want to thank you for being my guest today. It's been very good conversation. Like I said, very rarely do I talk politics on my pod, but we did, and it was very in a very good light and everything. So, James, thank you so much for being a
Yeah.
guest
Yeah.
on today, and we'll definitely be in touch. And when you get a chance, text me your home address. I don't know whether you did that or not, and I'd like to send you out something to say thank you for being on my podcast today.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's been great. And I really appreciate the level of your podcast. Okay. I really do. I think it's insightful. And I also think that, we need more of that. It's very
Oh,
rare. And I hope your audience grows significantly because I think it's needed.
well, thank you
We
so
don't have,
much. Yeah.
yeah, we don't have enough Tucker Carlsons and stuff like that. So we need more, maybe,
Well, yeah.
yeah,
Wow, you put me in that
Warren.
category. That's pretty awesome.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, well,
So,
listen, have a blessed day and good talking with you. Thank you so much.
yep. You have a good day too. All right.
Take care.